everyone. It is Wednesday evening and I'm a little late getting this up, but here we go. We have just enough daylight. Chapter 12, In the Nest. In Clover and Valerian's nest, under the boulder, there was nothing but despair. Poppy's news of Ragweed's death had devastated the family. The coming of the beavers, the damming of the brook, the creation of the pond, their change of homes, all of that had been difficult to accept. But the family had shared the notion, spoken and unspoken, that Ragweed would return and somehow, some way, sort things out. Poppy's tragic news made it perfectly clear that no such thing would happen. Everything was now worse. In one corner of the nest sat a disconsolate Clover, staring off into nothing that anyone else could see. From time to time she let forth a profoundly deep sigh and shifted her bulk as if gathering her last breath in her chest. Though her black eyes were dry, they held such a weight of wretched pain it alarmed her own children. When a child brushed by, it always seemed like an accident, but it happened often, Clover reached out and touched it gently. Sometimes she stroked it, but there was little life or spirit to her paw. As for Valerian, though he was just as heartbroken as Clover, he spent his time and energy trying to comfort the children. "Your mother will be fine," he kept telling them. "She's just very sad." And it is sad. The children did notice that now and again Valerian wiped his cheeks with the back of his paw or blew his nose so loudly it sounded like the honking of a goose heading south. "Summer colds are stupid," he kept saying. No one pointed out that he had no cold before Poppy's news. Those children who remembered Ragweed best sniffled, wept in corners, or exchanged reminiscences, trying with little success to keep their grief private or to keep a brave face. Then they got into their heads that it was their parents who needed to be consoled most. Not knowing what to say, they did what they thought was the next best thing. They did whatever they were asked to do, and some things that they were not asked as well, did them so fast they almost tripped over themselves in their desire to please their parents. So they were constantly cleaning up, sweeping the entry hall, minding the infants, preparing meals, anything they could think of that might soothe their parents. Someone was always sweeping, straightening up, or burping babies. The result was a continual low hubbub that got on everyone's nerves. If two of the youngest mice got into a scuffle, they didn't quite grasp what had happened. It was their elder brothers and sisters who stepped in and stifled the discord. "Please," they whispered, "Clover is very sad," or "Valerian is crying." This so alarmed the youngsters that they sniffed and whimpered and clung to their parents more than ever. As for Poppy, she hardly knew what to do or say. No one asked her to do anything. No one asked her to leave. On the contrary, they had assured her that she could stay. She was stared at a lot as one who had a particular connection to Ragweed and his awful death, and thus seemed extraordinary. Still, no one inquired about her feelings, her life. She felt as useless as an extra doll. She did find time to take Thistle aside and ask, "Was I wrong? But didn't I see another brother here? He had a notch on his right ear. He was standing way in the back, behind you all. He seemed to have rushed away." "You must mean Rye," Thistle replied. "Rye," Poppy repeated, grateful that at least she now had a name for the one with whom she had danced. "Where do you think he went?" she asked, sensing that she was blushing a little. Thistle cocked her head to one side and considered Poppy. Then, in a matter-of-fact way, she said, "Rye's always a little weird." "Weird? Why? How?" "He gets sort of dreamy. You know, he goes off a lot by himself." "Well, why do you think he ran off this time?" Poppy wanted to know, though she had a fairly good idea. "He's very emotional," Thistle said. "He loved Ragweed, but he sort of didn't, if you know what I mean." I don't think I do." "A younger brother," Thistle whispered, as if to explain it all, and then she added, "See, Ragweed wasn't big enough to admit Rye was better than he was at some things. He was always giving Rye a hard time, and Rye, he was, well, envious that his brother was everybody's favorite. Do you think Rye will come back? Thistle shrugged. Yeah, sure. Poppy tried to make herself useful by tending to the children. She was not very good at it. Besides, they were inclined to stare at her as if she were something odd. Being a deer mouse, she was smaller than they were, and her fur was a different color. For her own part, Poppy knew perfectly well she was stalling, doing little except waiting for Rye to return. At the same time, the thought of his coming back made her nervous. She wasn't exactly sure what she felt. What would she say to him? Poppy's thoughts were interrupted when Clover asked Valerian to bring her close. I need to ask you a little more about ragweed, she said to Poppy. I'll tell you anything I know, Poppy said. Clover and Valerian asked Poppy many questions. How had she met ragweed? Where was the dimwood forest she had come from? Who and what was her family? Did she and ragweed in fact marry? Poppy told them all that had happened, how she had grown up with her own family on a farm at the edge of dimwood forest, how she had met and fallen in love with ragweed, only to be right there when the owl, Mr. Okax, had killed him. She told them then how she had defeated this Mr. Okax. Finally, she told them of her desire to bring them the news of their son. As she told her tale, she kept looking out of the corner of her eye for Rye. The last thing she wanted was for him to show up and hear what she was saying. We need to know, Valerian said, when Poppy was done, that even though you didn't marry Ragweed, we'd like to think of you as our daughter. We really do, Clover agreed, with a catch in her voice. This isn't much of a home, Valerian went on, but it's all we have. You're welcome to stay, too. Thank you, Poppy returned. I'm truly touched. She reached up and took off Ragweed's earring. I brought this back for you, she said. It was his. I thought you should have it. She held out the earring. The purple bead seemed to glow. The little chain sparkled. Did he give it to you? Clover asked. In a way, Poppy said. Ah, Clover said softly. He wasn't wearing one when he left home. It must have been something to do with his life he had with you. I have no idea where he got it, Poppy told them. If he had it on when I met him. Any notion what he did from the time he left here to the time he met you? Valerian asked. Poppy shook her head. He never really said, but he did talk about his home fondly. Clover held the earring in the palm of her paw, as if it were something magical. With a sigh, she offered it to Valerian, who contemplated it too. Then Valerian handed it back to Poppy. I think you should keep it. Poppy looked to Clover. Clover nodded in agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Poppy took the earring and fixed it back on her ear. I'll stay a little while. But Poppy knew she was only staying so she could speak to Rye. What had happened with Ragweed, she told herself, was the past. It was done, finished, complete. She would remember the past, but she would not live it. Instead, she would wait for Rye. But Rye did not return, though no one seemed to be concerned. Poppy began to wonder if he would ever come back. She began to suspect and fear that he would not. And that is the end of chapter 12. And I will see you with a new chapter or two tomorrow. Good night.